It is Thursday the 17th of March at the time of recording. You might be watching this a bit later on. But anyway, the fact is it's Thursday, it's race week, and it's crucially also the first race of the 2022 Formula One season. And it's time for me to make some predictions as to what's going to go down. Well, last time I did one of these prediction videos, it didn't go particularly well. I think I had about a 30% accuracy rate, if that. So hopefully we're going to do a bit better this time round. And I will say I've made the same mistake again. I made all these predictions before Spanish testing was up. It wasn't even testing, was it? It was Spanish shakedown. Before that had finished, I'd made my predictions because I had to send them off to a magazine. So these were already set in stone, and then they appeared on the podcast. They were set more in stone, or rather in sound. So the fact is these predictions could be just as wrong as last year's. We've got about 10 months to wait to find out. Anyway, let's get down to it, and we'll start with the teams. Starting off at the bottom, 10th place, I can see it being Alfa Romeo. I don't think they're going to have a particularly strong year of things. They look to have some reliability issues coming through the Spanish shakedown sessions. Bahrain didn't look any better for them, and they've got a fairly unconvincing driver lineup. Don't get me wrong, I like Valtteri Bottas, but I just can't see him being able to get that. Alfa Romeo was a C44 chassis this year through the midfield. It's never been one of his fortes, fighting a car through the midfield, through the middle of a pack. Even when he had the brilliant Mercedes underneath him, we saw it with the W12, the W11s, he just couldn't do it. So I can't see him really being able to make hay while the sun shines, even if there is a chaotic race, when the Alfa Romeo could work its way to the front. And sitting in the other Alfa Romeo seat is, of course, Guan Yu Zhou, or Zhou Guan Yu, depending on which way around we're saying his name. Bit of an unknown quantity when it comes to Formula One. He's coming into the sport after it has a huge regulation change. These cars are going to be like nothing he's driven before. It's a big step up for him, and I think asking a lot of him this season is, going to be asking a lot of him. So fairly low expectations for Alfa Romeo. 9th place, I'm giving to Haas, and I can genuinely see them raking in some points this season. The whole sort of shake-up of the regulations is designed to bring all the teams closer together, and I think this might work in Haas's favour. They've got a fairly strong lineup. I will say that Kevin Magnussen coming back to the team has elevated my expectations somewhat, and Mick Schumacher is now in his second year of this flight of motorsport. It's always taken him about a year to get up to speed with things, all the way through F3, F2, and he's now had a year to get used to F1. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on here. And obviously Kevin Magnussen, a lot of history in the sport. He did get a podium on his debut with Renault back in 2014 in Australia. I think I've got the right year there. And he's a good driver. He's a very quick driver. And obviously we saw in Bahrain with testing that Haas does have a ton of speed to it. So if Kevin's able to extract that from it, we could see a few points finishes for the American outfit over the season. So 9th place for them. 8th place, Aston Martin. The Silverstone-based team just aren't setting me alight with their expectations this year. While Seb might be able to drive around any chassis shortfalls from the AMR22, I can't see Lance being able to do much the same, so it could be a few points finishes here and there. I doubt we'll be fortunate enough to see a Seb podium this year, despite what Ben Wellham said on the podcast. 7th place, I'm going to give it to Williams, and I reckon this could be the start of Williams' big comeback. Last year was a strong launching point for that comeback. New funding in the team, new sort of drive with Jost Capito, isn't it, who's leading the team. He seems to be doing it very well indeed. We've now got Alex Albon taking over from George Russell, and we've still got Nicholas Latifi coming into his 3rd year in the sport. A bit like 1998, I think, where we had another Canadian driver in a Williams seat for his 3rd year. So, Williams 7th place, fair few points finishes, a lot of sort of 9th, 8th, maybe even the odd 7th place. I really wouldn't be surprised if we see perhaps even something 5th or higher this season as well. 6th place, AlphaTauri. Seems a bit of a low ball, that one, but I think it's going to be fairly close. I've already mentioned it's going to be a fairly close season. The teams are going to be all jumbled up with these new regulations, and AlphaTauri are going to be pretty hot on the heels of 5th and 4th place. That's without a shadow of a doubt. They're probably going to be able to pull away from Williams and definitely pull away from Aston Martin. They were their sort of big Aston Martin especially were their big rivals last season, as were my 5th place guess of Alpine. I think both 5th and 6th, again, we're going to see a very close battle between these two, but I reckon Alpine might just have the edge. Ocon over Gasly, and certainly Alonso over the lot of them, really. He is a fantastic driver. He's back in the sport, and he seems to really get on with this new chassis. when it doesn't catch fire. So we'll see what happens, and I can really put some money on Alpine coming home 5th, if I had any money. 4th place, McLaren. I don't think they're going to be able to break into the top 3 this year. I just can't see it being their year. They've got too many strong driver lineups ahead of them, and their chassis is, well, good. Might not be as advanced as many of the others on the grid. They might be able to pick up the pace towards the end of the season. We'll just have to wait and find out. But yeah, I can see 4th place being a strong finish for McLaren. They'll be definitely ahead of Alpine, but I don't think they'll be snapping on the heels of 3rd place and Red Bull. 3rd place seems a bit of a low ranking for Red Bull, and might seem unfair, but I just don't think that this year's car is going to be able to properly take the fight to the Mercedes and the Ferrari ahead of them. I won't say which order they're in just yet, but I can just see Red Bull having a bit of an issue this year. I can see Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen taking a bit of time to really get used to the car, especially under racing conditions when driven in pure anger. So we'll see what happens, but it won't be a bad 3rd place. It'll have been a hard fought for 3rd place, if that makes sense. 2nd place, Ferrari. I don't think it's going to be a complete Ferrari domination this season. I'm on the Ferrari hype train. I reckon they're going to do well, but I just can't see them taking the overall win for constructors this year. I reckon that Mercedes are going to pull it out the bag. They might not have looked competitive in testing. Was that sandbagging? Was that them just having a genuine issue? We don't know. But I reckon they might pull something out of the bag towards the tail end of the season. Plus, they have Lewis Hamilton and George Russell driving for them. That is a very competitive driver lineup that should be able to drive its way around any problems early on in the season. Meanwhile, Ferrari in 2nd place, while they do have Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, they're 2 drivers that do also seem to be plagued by a lot of bad luck. So if we're playing it like that, it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top. But I reckon it's definitely going to be close all the way up the grid, right up to the top. Looking at the drivers now, and we'll start again at the bottom. 20th place, I can see it being Guan Yu Zhou, Zhou Guan Yu. Again, like I've already said with teams, new regulations, cars unlike anything he's ever driven before, it's going to be a bit of an uphill struggle. Plus, he's going to be battling against a driver that could have the upper hand when it comes to sort of team calls and strategy calls. I reckon the team might favour Bottas just to get a bit more data from the car, if anything, especially early on. So it'll be interesting to see how his rookie season goes. He is a rookie after all, so I don't think it's fair to put too much pressure on his shoulders. 19th place, Kevin Magnussen. Now, originally I'd left this gap blank in the hopes of someone other than Nikita Mazepin being in it, and lo and behold, we got Kevin, the Danish driver, back from, he did do a year in IMSA 2021, wasn't it? He did a year in IMSA, but now he's back in Formula 1, he's back with the Haas team, and I can see him picking up points, but not as many as Mick Schumacher, who I've put in 18th place. I can see Mick just having a bit better of a season, potentially a more favourable arrangement from the team. Who knows? Obviously, we know Kevin is going to be with the team for a few more years. He signed a multi-year contract. I can't remember how many off the top of my head. So obviously, they might favour Mick for his last year or two in the team, and then Kevin will take over as the lead driver. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But yeah, Kevin Magnussen 19th. 18th place, Mick Schumacher. 17th place, Nicholas Latifi. I can see a few points finishes coming for the Canadian driver in that Williams. Looks to be a fairly competitive setup, and it's not bad. It's not going to be a bad 17th place. He's going to be close to the drivers around him, but I don't know. I like him and everything, but I can't see him really getting that far up the field. Valtteri Bottas comes in as my 16th place driver. Again, he's going to be hobbled a bit by that Haas, hobbled a bit by stuck in the midfield a lot of the time. If he can do well in qualifying, which we've seen him do on a number of occasions, he is a fast qualifier, then by all means we could see some good points finishes from him. But on days when he might have to fight his way through the field, could be a struggle to get some points for Valtteri Bottas. So he's got 16th place. 15th and 14th go to the Aston Martin drivers, Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel respectively. I reckon Seb is going to outscore Lance. I reckon he'll be able to drive around any flaws in the chassis that there are. Lance might struggle a little bit with that. 13th place, Alex Albon. Now this is a very optimistic vote for Alex Albon, my big tall boy. He's about 1.8 metres tall. He's about as tall as Esteban Ocon actually. He's one of the tallest drivers on the grid this year. And I can see him scoring some points in that Williams. He's coming back, he's got a lot to fight for and a lot to show. Obviously he's not one of these sort of pay drivers. He is coming into this sport and has a lot to prove. He's had his year away in DTM. It's going to be interesting to see what he's picked up and if he's got a bit more of fire in his belly, because obviously we started to see that come through towards the tail end of 2020, but we sort of gone before we got a proper chance to really bed that in. 12th place is Yuki Tsunoda. I reckon if Alex can get close to Yuki, that would be enough to really remind Red Bull why they had him in the junior categories at all. And obviously 12th place Yuki Tsunoda, it's going to be a good year for Yuki. A few more points finishes. We saw an absolute blinder of a season finale from him in Abu Dhabi, 4th place. Wonderful, amazing stuff. And genuinely a very good way of cementing, again, in the minds of Red Bull seniors as to why they picked him out of the sort of crowd of Formula 3, Formula 2 drivers to come up and join them in Formula 1. So it'll be interesting to see how he progresses this year. Obviously, we've seen a lot of driver development from him through the latter part of last season when he moved down to Faenza in Italy. He's a lot more bedded in with the team. The chassis looks pretty competitive, and I reckon we'll see some hot competition between him and Pierre Gasly. 11th place, Esteban Ocon. I reckon this is where we're going to start seeing a very bunched up pack and a lot of different points sort of scattered across the board here. Esteban Ocon, potentially some more podiums for him this season. I don't know if we'll see another race win, although if circumstances are fortunate enough for him, maybe we will. But there we go, 11th place, Esteban Ocon. 10th place I'm going to be giving to Daniel Ricciardo. I can see him having a bit of a struggle again this season. Obviously he missed out on a huge amount of testing in Bahrain, so that's kind of played well into my initial predictions actually. So he's going to be coming into the first race of the season on the back foot. We already know that he could well be feeling a bit of the pressure from Lando Norris, who really did sort of have him on the ropes through most of last season, even if Netflix did over-egg that pudding a bit. But anyway, 10th place doesn't seem too unfair or too sort of negative as a prediction. I've said guarantee there's going to be points. There might even be a few podiums from Danny Rick, but when it comes up against the other drivers that I've got ahead of him in the list, I just don't think he's going to have as strong a season. Other drivers in that list are, of course, Pierre Gasly, 9th place. I reckon this is going to be Pierre Gasly breaking into the top 10. He has got this year and potentially next year to really try and find another team to move to. Red Bull have got a lot of junior drivers moving up through the categories, and they're going to be looking for seats. If Pierre can find somewhere else to move to, he's not in the sort of situation of being forced out so much as he can move out and vacate that seat. It'll be a lot better for everyone and give him a bit more choice. So he's obviously going to have to really prove himself this year if he really wants to try and get his foot in the door at somewhere like Aston Martin, if he wants to go for Alpine even. It depends who's opening up a seat where. Fernando Alonso is my 8th place prediction, and I reckon this is going to be a good year for Fernando Alonso. L Plan will be coming into action, and it just depends what he can make of L Plan, whatever L Plan is. We still don't really know, but hopefully it is a few Fernando Alonso podiums. It was brilliant seeing him on the podium in Qatar, wasn't it, last season? So if we see him there again this year, no complaints from me at all. 7th place, and this is probably where I've predicted someone a bit too low, Charles Leclerc. I can't see him having a very good season, especially in a very tightly packed sort of point scoring bunch. If he has a few unlucky races, a few where he just oversteps the mark and sort of bins it, he might not be able to really stay at the top end of the sort of field when it comes points wise. So he could be sort of knocked down to 7th place after just missing out on one race, especially given how close things are going to be. So Charles Leclerc, 7th place, possibly a bit harsh. We wait to be surprised. 6th place, Sergio Perez. Obviously, Sergio did very well last season. He came home 4th place overall in the drivers' standings. But this year, it's looking like a more packed field. We have an even better array of drivers at the top end. And I think just against the cars that he's going to be facing in a very different Red Bull chassis that could be a bit tricky to get get a handle on early on, could see him struggle for the first half of the season, which would open the door for 5th place and Lando Norris. I can see Lando doing pretty well this season. Obviously, absolutely stellar 2021. Really showed Daniel exactly what to do with that MCL 35, wasn't it? I think, yeah, MCL 35M was the chassis last year, MCL 36 this year. He knew what he was doing when he stepped into that car at the beginning of the season. Obviously, just had a whirlwind of a season, seconds, thirds. He nearly had 2 wins. Let's remind ourselves, obviously, Monza and Sochi. So potentially this will be the year we see a Lando Norris win, another one of those volcanoes of champagne. 4th place, Max Verstappen. Yeah, last year's world champion coming home 4th place this year. I don't think it's too much of a wild prediction. I reckon we're going to see Max not necessarily struggle, but potentially start overdriving the car very early on as he fights to try and get a handle on exactly what it's like, especially once it ends up in the dirty area of other cars. They follow quite well, apparently, but there is a sort of range where they start to struggle, and then if you can push through that point, you apparently do quite well once you're next to and alongside other cars. So we'll see what happens when Max gets his hands on those, whether his aggression is too much for the new chassis or exactly what they need. But I reckon 4th place could be where we end up seeing Max Verstappen, just behind Lewis Hamilton in 3rd. I reckon it's going to be another bit of a, not necessarily duff year for Lewis Hamilton. We're going to see some brilliant driving from him, and it's going to be another one of those years that reminds you of that spark we had when he came into the sport in the late 2000s. So it's not a bad 3rd place, but again, given how densely packed we're assuming the grid's going to be, it's probably going to hurt quite a bit, especially if he comes home behind George Russell in 2nd place. Putting a bit of money on George Russell really coming home 2nd here. I'm really hoping that he's going to be able to show Mercedes exactly what he's made of. Obviously, we saw him with that blistering performance in Bahrain back in 2020 when he was deputising for Lewis Hamilton. What's he going to be like when he's in a car he fits in, wearing shoes that fit him, and a race suit that wasn't just pulled out the back of a cupboard? It's going to be very interesting indeed. And I reckon he could bring it home 2nd place overall by the end of the year. I reckon we'll definitely see a few race wins, and that's going to be something special indeed. And then 1st place, Carlos Sainz. He's not got a big window to really stamp his name in that Ferrari book. And I reckon this year, potentially next year, are going to be Carlos's best chance, especially if Charles Leclerc begins to get his act together. So we'll see what happens for the Spaniard, but this could be the year that he needs to get his name right at the top of that list. And 1st place, I reckon Carlos has got it.